Straight talk from Israel. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Good morning. Good morning. My name is Andrea Simintov, and you are listening to Pull Up a Chair on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. What a glorious list of people listening in this morning, this very early morning here in Eretz Israel, the Holy Land, and or very late at night. Good evening to my friends in the U.S. and Canada. It is late. Boker Tov, Eretz Israel, Betach. The UK is listening in this morning. This afternoon, we have Australia, Germany, Spain, Sweden, Switzerland, and welcome. Good morning, Saudi Arabia. What a treat. It's an honor. It really is a humbling honor. And the chat room is open. If you're listening to this live, you obviously know about the chat room. You hit the button. Just drop me a note. Tell me where you're listening in from. Love to hear it. And great way to start the day. This is our Sukkot show, Sukkot show. And let's see, I took a lot of notes today. I took so many notes that, despite the Seger, the lockdown here in Israel, there are indeed sukkahs, booths, little mini tabernacles peppering our landscape. And I'm saying to myself, why? Can't we just give it up this year? Everything is different. Everything is weird. And I'm reminded of the Jews, of the Hebrews in the desert when they were offered the Torah and they said, Na'aseh v'nishma, we will do and we will listen. That's how much faith we have. You say it, we do it. The figuring out, the whys, the conversations, the debates, that comes later. Na'aseh v'nishma. And even as we speak, it's 7:09 in the morning. I share this with you. My husband, Ronnie, is actually in the parking lot right now putting the schach, the bamboo covering on our sukkah that we will discuss in greater detail. And all of us, we all have an opportunity this year to experience the joy of happiness, holiness, and indeed, the commonality and the communion of homelessness. My name is Andrea Simintov, and we'll talk more about this on the other side.
Always challenging the status quo. Hello, I'm Rod Bryant on Beyond the Matrix here at IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. I want to encourage you to listen each week, every Wednesday at the same time, for an amazing show that will challenge you, inform you, and inspire. News, views, and wisdom for the nations here on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. Don't forget, Beyond the Matrix every week, Wednesday, here on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com.
And we're back. Andrea Simintov, pull up a chair. And I want to say good morning, Vietnam. You've also joined us this morning. I cannot tell you, anybody listening in, how humbling it is, how truly humbling. And thank you. Thank you. Every year at this time, I had a birthday this week. Actually, I think yesterday was my Hebrew birthday and 2 days ago was my English birthday. And it was a little shock because, there's no celebrating, there's no going out, there's no popping open a bottle of champagne. We're just stuck at home in the Seger, the clothes. And there's a lot of time for reflection. And the years creep up. Suddenly you're saying, oh, last year, 2 years ago. And then you're saying 40 years ago. And you're thinking, when did it happen to me? When did I become such a geezer? And I was thinking about this upcoming show, and you could hear the hammering in the parking lots and on the mirpesiot, the balconies outside the homes, and people putting up their sukkahs. The weather is still quite warm in Israel, but it will be getting cooler. But I'm thinking about the folks in the States and in Canada and in Northern Europe who are putting up sukkahs, and how their non-Jewish neighbors must be looking at them and saying, what are these crazy people? I mean, they don't stop with the holidays. They don't stop asking for the days off. And now they're building booths. They're going out camping. Now's the time to light up the fireplace. But it's the opposite. It's a time of faith. And I was thinking about this show, and occasionally we talk politics, occasionally we talk current events, and I always have, a whole bunch of index cards in case we run out of material. Guess what? We don't. And last week, somebody posted on the wall, I believe it was, no, it doesn't matter, Mr. L, and he was writing, they were chatting between themselves on the chat room. I'm going on merrily on this. And he said, Andrea is my weekly dose of B12. And it might have been flippant. It might have been a little aside. I cannot tell you what that meant to me, kind of cheating, looking out of the corner of my eye and seeing that. And I thought about the awesome responsibilities we all have toward one another. So many people have crossed our paths in our lives and are no longer there. And there's something very lovely about being in lockdown when you don't hear the sounds of the cars and the sounds of the buses and the sounds of the people in the street and the sounds of the schools. You hear the quiet and you can remember. And I'm remembering people who made an impact. And once my Rebbitzin Debbie Greenwald once said that when she was a little girl, she was standing on a street corner singing camp songs with friends that were waiting for the bus. And you know what it is in the camp, you sing and all the fun stuff. And a girl walked past her and said, you'll never be a singer. And from that moment on, she might have been 9 years old, 10 years old. She never again sang aloud robustly in synagogue, at the Sabbath table, at a folk music concert. Those words stung her so deeply in her soul. And this is a very solid gal. And yet, she also recalled a teacher. She had written a note. She had written an essay in school. And the teacher wrote, beautiful work. You could be a writer. Those words had such an impact on her that she said when she writes notes to the teachers about her children's behavior or about something missing, she sits, she constructs, because she could be a writer, those few words. And I was thinking to myself, I was a little girl, an annoying child, an extremely annoying child, especially in Hebrew school when I didn't want to be there. I wanted to be home dancing to the Beatles. And I had a Rabbi Zakon, may he rest in peace. And his continence and the way he loved prayer and loved Torah, I'm sure that it was not a great mark of distinction to have to teach my class of 5th grade elementary school students, to teach them the daily prayers. And in his heart of hearts, he knew that many of us would grow up, most of us would grow up and be not observant. But each day he wore his love of Torah, his love of Yiddishkeit, Judaism. He wore it. I ignored him. I made fun of him. I made fun of things that he must have been hiding in his beard, just like the other children. And when I pray and I light my candles, Rabbi Zakon is the face of holiness that I see. When I say the Shmona Esrei, the 18 benedictions, and I bow my knees during the mandatory 4 brachot, blessings, that we bow our knees, I emulate my late mother-in-law, Rachel Bas Leah, because when she bent her knees, you could see the supplication, the submission to God's majesty. And when I dress, and when I arrange my headwear, and I put on my makeup, under the mask, of course, I channel Rebbetzin Yeager, who taught me all about Jewish femininity and dignity. The question isn't, who are my idols? Who are my gurus? The question I'm asking is, did they know the impact? It doesn't matter. The difference between this world and holiness is what we give off. And you know, at the end of my notes today, I was going to tell you that one of the things that, let me just see us now, I'm going through my notes. One of the deciding or differences in our holiday in Sukkot is that at the end of Sukkot, we celebrate Simchas Torah, happiness of receiving the Torah, and we also celebrate what we call Shmini Atzeret, okay? It's the 8th day. I can't really find my notes here about that one. But one of the things I wanted to tell you was that really there's not a lot going on with Shmini Atzeret. Shmini Atzeret is, we don't have anything, real big going on except we say Yiskar, the memorial prayer to the dead. And then, so you may say, like, well, why do we do that? I mean, the memorial prayer to the dead, that's not Lebedik, that's not exciting, that's not celebrating. Oh, yes, it is. It is. Because if you don't know where you came from, you can't know where you're going. And that's the beauty. That's why we say Yiskor. I am not my home. I am not my crystal chandeliers. I am not my bank account. I am not my car and my diamonds. I am my legacy. And even if our legacy is peppered with pain, peppered with things that are not so worthy of celebration, that feeds our muse. No one is exempt from grabbing the brass ring of holiness. One of the things I think everybody listening in, I mean, you should Google, see what a sukkah is. A sukkah is, it's a little outside booth, must be exposed to the sun. You cannot build a sukkah underneath an overhang. That's why we're putting ours in the parking lot. We have a patio, but over our patio is another balcony. So we can't. Because if you can't, in the dark of the sukkah, look up through the bamboo slats and see the stars, then you're missing the point, the whole purpose of understanding that we are so small. We could even be considered insignificant unless we understand what is so great and so vast. If we seal the roof of our sukkah, we're defeating the purpose. The purpose is to at least crawl out of our homes, out of our comfort zones for 8 days and give it up to God, to say, I may not know God. I may not honor all the commandments, but one thing I do know is I am not God. Now, our sukkahs have to be open to people. Very difficult in the year of Corona. There, we've hit on the social issue. So the thing is, this year, many of us have sukkahs that we have 20 people and 30 people, and we have them for all our meals, all the guests. This year, we have sent a WhatsApp to everybody in our building telling them that the sukkah is available for them to use. Please let us know when they'll be using. Let us all honor one another and practice social distancing. Let's give credence to the laws of not spreading disease. So on the first night of Sukkot, instead of a bunch of people, instead of us hanging out with 14 relatives, we have invited 2 of our neighbors to join us at a big table And interesting, I laughed because it said, we'll talk later about reaching out to the stranger, the orphan, and the widow. And so one of the guests is both a stranger and a widow, and the other one is a stranger and a divorcee, and the other is a widow. So we covered our bases there. All right, when we come back, let's see, what are we going to talk? Oh my gosh, we're running down. Oh yeah, we're going to talk about the mitzvah. We're going to talk about all the different people that are present in absentia.
Shalom, everybody. Making a difference often takes just one moment and one person at a time. I am Orly Benny Davis, your show host on Israel News Talk Radios from Jerusalem with Love. You'll be hearing people talking about politics, religion, social issues, and making a better tomorrow. Join me, Orly Benny Davis, for God and Country. From Jerusalem with Love.
Wednesdays on Israel News Talk Radio.
Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Did you know this psalm and many others were composed by a Jewish shepherd and musician who later became a king? Would you like to know some of the inner meanings of psalms to help you connect with God and strengthen your soul? An exciting and easy-to-read book is now available which will help you do just that. Software for the Soul, Psalms for Everyone, available on Kindle, Audible, and Amazon.com. Software for the Soul.
Modesty at the beach? It isn't just about body image. It's about feeling good. Modest swimsuits, so we don't get burned by the sun.
So we won't get ogled by strangers.
So we'll feel free to express ourselves without the need to expose ourselves.
Let Marcy Modest help you to cover up what you want, how you want.
Made in Israel.
Visit marcymodest.com. That's MARSEA modest.com.
And get a 10% discount on your first purchase.
Okay, we're back. Andrea Simontel, pull up a chair, Israel News Talk Radio.com. If you have any questions about the holidays, anything you want to take exception with, anything you'd like to share with me, but not necessarily in the chat room, please feel free to write to me at Andrea@IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. I do make a concerted effort to get back to everyone, and I love receiving your notes and your thoughts, and sometimes just telling me a little bit about your story. Like hearing from all of you. Quick reminder, got a note this morning from my husband, Ronnie. We write to each other on WhatsApp. Because he's up on a ladder right now in the parking lot, stopping traffic, putting the cover on our sukkah. All right, so he sent me this beautiful meme, and it was very, very clear. It said, if the roles were reversed and the young were more likely to die, grandparents and parents would do absolutely everything to protect us. That refers, of course, to those who claim that there are some that are expendable in the fight against COVID-19. And my answer always is not a Jewish value, not a Jewish thought. We never were meant to be numbers. We were, at best, a half a shekel to be combined with a whole another half. Okay, so what are we to learn from the holiday of Sukkot? Crazy. I mean, we've just come out of Rosh Hashanah, followed by Yom Kippur. Truly, I don't want to use the word agonizing because they're so delightful. We really are enveloped in his love. I mean, we've been given the lottery ticket, a winning ticket. Every one of us is now holding the winning ticket. What are we doing with it? So first of all, if somebody, it's important to know, practically speaking, if somebody is uncomfortable in the sukkah, miserable, cold, freezing, frightened, whatever it is, they are exempt from this mitzvah. If someone who is pained while performing it, then clearly they cannot show solidarity with those to whom pain is a way of life. You know that what we call the ger ezrach identity, the stranger and the citizen identity, the meshing it together will turn to resentment, and the point of the mitzvah will be lost. It is written, and you shall be happy in your holidays, you, the stranger, the orphan, and you shall be only happy. The Torah mandates the happiness of the holiday of Sukkot. We're taught that we must bring joy and happiness to the lives of and identify with the less fortunate. You know, the Rambam teaches us that we eat this festival meal, that we have to provide for the stranger, the orphan, the widow. The true fulfillment of the mitzvah of Sukkah in our times is indeed a message of solidarity, crawling out of our homes when we don't want to, because there are those that are indeed homeless, whether it be literal or spiritual. The message of Sukkot is that both are one. A stranger looks forward to change and a bright and a productive future, while the citizen looks to the past, i.e. Yisker, and sees from where he came. The true Simchat HaChag, the happiness of the holiday, takes place when both the stranger and the citizen become aware of their common destination. I guess that's what the meaning of commonality is. So, you know, the Gemara explains that the mitzvah of sitting in the sukkah is to leave our permanent dwellings and sit in a temporary dwelling. It's referred to as a shelter of faith. Well, discomfort maybe, inconvenience. We have neighbors who are going to be sharing our sukkah. I tell you, they live on the 5th floor. We do not have an elevator. So they're going to be walking up and down and up and down. There are some people to whom that would be a terrible inconvenience and enough to say, I'm opting out. But they don't do that, okay? Also, it helps that we're offering them our house to put their stuff in. But the purpose of it is rooted in, remember the clouds of glory in the Torah? Sukkot mamash, the real Sukkot in the desert happened. And we commemorate this in a kind of a ceremonial way. We recognize that it's God who provides everything for us. He provided for us during the 40 years in the Midbar, and he continues to provide everything for us now. The words "go out of your permanent dwelling" mean exactly that. Because the 8 days is really temporary. But just as this world, this life is temporary, Sukkot reinforces the faith to recognize, to appreciate, to truly believe that as hidden as it sometimes seems to us, God does provide for all our needs, the past, the present, and indeed the future. Great story I came across. Hold on, let me open this so I can keep my eye on the time. Yes. Sir Moses Montefiore, greatest Jew, the richest Jew of his generation, the most wealthy. He visited a very famous rabbi in Warsaw. Now, the rabbi had, and Rabbi Montefiore, came with his carriages, his caravan, his entourage. Is that what the word retinue is? I don't really know. Anyway, and he's coming to meet this great rabbi, and he was shocked. He entered his house, and he was surprised to find it empty, except for a single chair. So Sir Montefiore asked, "Well, Rabbi, where's your sofa, your pillows, your pictures, your carpets?" And the Rav replied, "Where are yours?" Well, Sir Montefiore responded, "When I travel, I'm a guest. My furniture is at home." And the Rav answered, "I too am a traveling guest in this world. My furniture is waiting for me at home, in Olam Haba, the world to come." Little perspective on going out of our homes for 8 days and living in a ramshackle booth. Now, brings us to the Lulav and the Etrog. The Lulav and the Etrog. The Lulav is the palm branch, very majestic, very beautiful, very tall. You know, you can look at it Chabad.com, I think it is. Esha Torah or Sameach, they have all the pictures. And the etrog is kind of like a lemon on steroids. It's a citron fruit, really quite tart, quite terrible. Only time of the year we make this inedible jelly called citron jelly. Anyway, each species is said to Kabbalistically represent an aspect of the user's body. The lulav, the long lulav, represents the spine. The myrtle branch are the eyes, the willow are the lips, and the etrog represents the heart, all unified to create a whole, beautiful, and indeed intact human body with infinite potential. Jewish unity is one of the central themes of Sukkot, the four kinds that we hold together and we shake to the left, to the right, to the forward, to the back, to the up, to the down. They symbolize four types of Jews with different levels of Torah knowledge and observing differently. Bringing them together represents our unity as a nation, despite our external differences. The Lulav offers a lot of different clues on how to reach joy through relationships. Now, the Midrash says the four species of the Lulav represent four different types of Jews. Love it, love it, love it. The etrog has a good taste. That's the citron plant, and a very lovely fragrance. It represents a person who has both wisdom and good deeds in his arsenal. The hadass is a myrtle plant, has a good fragrance. My husband bought me one this week, but it's inedible. It represents a person who has good deeds, but indeed is lacking in wisdom. The lulav, the date palm, is edible. I don't know how many of you have eaten that. I have. But it has no smell. This represents a person who has wisdom, but he doesn't have good deeds. And the arava, the willow, has neither taste nor smell. It represents a person with neither good deeds nor Torah learning. On Sukkot, we gather these four species, we bind them together, and we wave them all together. The lulav is only kosher if all four species are taken together. If one of the species is missing, the entire lulav is invalid. I've spoken about this on the show before, that a similar principle is taught by the composition of the incense that was brought to the Beis HaMikdash, the Holy Temple. There were 11 ingredients, and one of which, the chelbana spice, it smelled terrible. Yet the incense was only valid if all the ingredients were included together. This teaches that we have to look at all of us as a unit working together. You know, there might be people we don't like, a lot of people who we don't agree with politically. We can't simply say that they are not part of our world, they don't belong to our life. On the contrary, if we don't get it, then we are missing the entire point of our entire existence. This recognition is basic to happiness, because when we realize that we're interconnected, we can be more tolerant of one another.
You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
This is Shai Bentako, and each week I'll be webcasting to you from Judea, origin of the word Jew, a people besieged and beleaguered in every generation. Nazi Germany is but a memory, but in its place the world invented the phantom Palestinians as this generation's internationally authorized Jew killers. Tune in for a different slant on life in Israel, Phantom Nation, every Monday.
Hi, I'm Rabbi David Aaron. The soul basics are the most profound, the most essential, and yet often the most neglected in our education. Join me for Soul Talk on Israel's News Talk Radio and discover the secrets to love, spiritual growth, and personal power.
How did a nice Jewish girl from Delaware end up living in Israel? Shalom, I'm Natalie Sapinski. Join me on my show, Returning Home. Meet different people who have moved to Israel. Hear their personal stories, their highs, their lows, and everything in between. Each week, we talk to experts on immigration and the process of moving to Israel. Listen to Returning Home every Thursday, only on Israel News Talk Radio.
And we're back. Andrea Simon-Tov, pull up a chair, IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. Wow, I just got notice about an engagement, a beautiful engagement, a second marriage for a very holy woman I know. Just so exciting. I'm reminded, they said that when Moshe, I'm going off script. I'm so excited. When Moshe Rabbeinu came down from Sinai carrying the first tablets and he saw Bnei Yisrael dancing around the golden calf, he smashed the tablets in rage, in such deep disappointment. But when he came down the second time, the tablets were that much more precious. It was understood when something is patched together, the value sometimes of understanding things the second time around. Lovely. Really, Mazel Tov Talia. Very exciting news. Okay. Wow, last section. Whoa. A story from Rabbi Hillel, who says, Im ani kan, hakol kan. Ve'im eini kan, mi kan. If I am here, then everything and everybody is here. And if I am not here, then who is here? What seems like kind of an existential discussion is actually a keen observation to what joy is about. To better understand this, Ben Zoma, his popular adage, and I'm telling you my Hebrew is so bad, Ezehu ashir hasameach bechelko. Who is rich? He who is happy with his lot. This is from Pirkei Avot, Ethics of Our Fathers. Joy is based in reality. And how you relate to your kan, your existence, your here, is inextricably linked with the rest of the world. As we said before we signed off before, being more patient with one another, more tolerant of one another, knowing that unless everyone is in our orbit is tainted, our orbit is flawed. Marked by our acceptance of ourselves and our lot in life, we can then move on. We don't have to look any further than the sukkah itself to understand this indeed difficult and extremely simple concept. The sukkah commemorates the clouds of glory that accompanied us, Bnei Yisrael, in the desert. It's a fragile dwelling. It's indeed temporary, designed to be temporary, and it perfectly represents, symbolizing our precarious existence. Knock on the head. If you think you're it, you're not getting it. It gives us an opportunity to appreciate what we have and what we know and where we come from. You know, well, I already talked about the Yizkor about that. Okay. Mentioned at the beginning that for a lot of places in the world, it's getting cold outside, and Sukkot comes at exactly the right time of year, both psychologically and emotionally. You know, if it weren't for the advent of Sukkot and all the preparations involved regarding the Festival of Joy, we could indeed get very depressed at having to climb down from the top of the ladder, the top of the mountain that glorious Yom Kippur left us at. The mundane would be that much more mundane. So the Torah allows us to contemplate our future, to look ahead of the year with a feeling of happiness and satisfaction. The Sukkah symbolizes the protection that God is going to provide for us for the whole year. And even though our actual sukkah is small and relatively and hopefully flimsy, strong enough to not blow over in a monsoon, but compared to our homes, it still symbolizes, here we're still on the mountain, it symbolizes our faith, our serenity, and our confidence in the eternity of Torah. Let's see, Avraham Avinu, had it right when he stated that people wonder at the magnificence of a beautiful building, but ignore the genius of the architect that designed it. Oh, look at this world. Look at the trees. Look at the forests. Judaism is always impressed by the wonder of the building, but we always look intently to recognize and acknowledge who actually laid the initial beams, the foundations, the floor work. Sukkot helps remind us of this necessity to always search for the architect. If you just look at the superficial, you ain't getting it. One of my favorite points and aspects, this is when, right at the end, Shmini Atzeret, we start to pray for water. We pray for an abundant winter, a wet winter, enough water. Not too much, but definitely not too little. And we depend on heaven for rain. Let's deep six the arrogance. Without water, life cannot function. Life cannot grow. The Torah tells us that Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, sent us purposely into a land where water is a precious commodity. There is no great rivers, no giant fabulous lakes that appear on the landscape of Israel. I promise you, I grew up on the water. This is the first time in my life I'm landlocked. We are dependent on the winter season's rains. So what do? We pray on Sukkot for those rains to be abundant and gentle and saturating and satisfying. Rain cleanses. It cleanses the land. It cleanses the earth. It cleanses the air we breathe. But it cleanses that life spirit that exists within each and every one of us. Rain and water, it also symbolizes the Torah and purification. Moshe, in his final oration to Israel, now states that his words of Torah should be felt as a gentle rain and dew descending on the Holy Land. The holiday of Sukkot reinforces this connection with its own link to Simchas Torah, happiness of the Torah. It's as simple as that. That's the name of the holiday. Simchat Torah, happiness in Torah, the day that marks the conclusion of this great and noble and introspective holiday period. Because just as it's obvious that the land of Israel can't survive, cannot prosper without water, so too the people of Israel will be unable to prosper, unable to survive without an attachment to Torah, without an attachment to the commandments, the mitzvot, without an attachment to our values. The message of Sukkot is a perfect conclusion to the spirituality of Yom Kippur. Joy, joy, simcha, gila rina, like almost all other emotions, is not something that we can turn on and off like a faucet. You should be happy. Well, okay, here it comes. We either feel joyful or we don't. You can't tell a person who's sad and depressed, get over it. Feel joyful. And just expect that it'll happen. The traditional commentators, according to Rabbi Wein, they have already remarked that since we've just passed through this cleansing process of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and feel relieved, we feel forgiven, we feel confident in our faith and in our relationship with our Creator, it's only natural to expect that we're going to feel joyful now. But you know what? in some way, it really only begs another question. It's difficult for someone to feel completely satisfied with themselves and their actions after going through such honest, sometimes painful self-examination. We're on the inside tract of our faults and our failings. And even though we're confident that, God's goodness has forgiven us, we're still aware, we're painfully aware of the problems that remain within us and limit us and might even prevent us from fully embracing the simcha, the joy. And yet the Torah insists that we be joyful and of good cheer on this holiday of Sukkot. So there's a little bit of a different perspective to the emotions of joy. A lot of the sadness in life is based on uncertainty, on the overwhelming amount of choices, options. Sukkot provides us with a little more clarity and perspective. It teaches us that our physical home and house is not quite as important as we may think it is. It instructs us in the beauty of nature, the necessity for blessings from heaven, the holiness and value of rain and productivity, and the realization that even though our lives and our existence are fragile, we should treasure every breathing moment and see it in perspective of our immortality and our eternity. Simply because it's only a mundane offering. The offering of Sukkot is water. It emphasizes that one can be joyful with even plain water if we accept the abundance and benevolence of our God in heaven. Chag Sameach and Shabbat Shalom.
Israel News Talk Radio's chat room. Just click the orange button at the top of the IsraelNewsTalkRadio.home page, log in as yourself or an anonymous guest, and join in on the fun. You'll meet other listeners from all over the world who listen to Israel News Talk Radio, and you can make new friends. Israel News Talk Radio's chat room. It's the closest you can get to being in the studio with us.
We love listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Where can you get the inside news on Israel? At Israel News Talk Radio, we're dedicated to sharing Israel's inside story with the world by providing our listeners with news on Israeli politics, current affairs, and Israeli Jewish culture. The Israel News Talk Radio homepage also provides you, the listener, with useful information at your fingertips, with scrolling news headlines, weather, currency exchange, Shabbat candlelighting times, and so much more. Our radio programming is always accessible and on demand. We operate absolutely free of charge for everyone, everywhere. If you love what we do, partner with us now by becoming an Israel News Talk Radio supporter. With your support, you'll be inscribed on our Israel News Talk Radio Wall of Fame. There's nothing like us in the world. Be part of something great. Israel News Talk Radio. Straight talk from Israel.
If you love Israel News Talk Radio, then you'll love our Facebook page. We keep you up to date on what's happening in Israel, plus little surprise treasures that we don't share on the radio. Go now to follow us on Facebook. Just look for the Israel News Talk Radio Facebook page, and don't forget to subscribe and follow us by clicking on the like button. We post great stuff there that you'll want to share. Israel News Talk Radio on Facebook and Israel News Radio on Twitter.
News, opinion, and more. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.